Hello, welcome back to another episode of Soul Sessions. I'm Debra Maldonado.
I'm Dr. Rob
of CreativeMind, and we have another jam-packed episode for you today. We've been talking a lot about relationships, parent and child relationships, how they affect our relationships in adult life. And if you missed any of those episodes, don't forget to go back and check them out. But today we get so many requests for people from people asking us about romantic love. Like, what about marriage? What about dating? What about love relationships? That's where we started working together early in our career, doing relationship coaching. So we're setting this episode just for you if you are in a relationship or want a relationship, romantic, want to fall in love, want to keep love lasting. This is going to be for you.
Absolutely.
And so,
juicy topic.
Yeah. So before we begin, I do want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, any of the podcast services, so that you can receive every episode. The more subscribers we have, the more people have access to this content. So let's start with love, Rob. Your favorite topic?
Yeah, and of course it's a huge topic. So we wanted to focus in on the shadow and how the shadow can play into romantic relationships, not just in a negative way, but also has great potential for growth.
Yes. So this isn't about healing or damaged parts of yourself. It's really about understanding your psyche and how it works. I do want to start by just clarifying some concepts so people understand. If you're new to our show, you don't know what the shadow is. It seems dark and ominous. So we have this self-concept that we acknowledge consciously of who we think we are. We have a conscious experience, memories of our childhood. We know what our title is at work. We kind of know our history. We have ideas of our personality and who we are. And so that's our like conscious self-concept. Now the shadow is unconscious aspects of our personality that we are not conscious of. And they play out in our relationships. And that's what the shadow is. It's not dark. It's all the light and dark aspects of personality that we do not own ourselves. They're kind of like disowned parts of ourselves that we do not allow.
Yeah, but they still linger and live in our unconscious mind. And really they're very much a part of our the dynamics of our relationships.
Yes, they're not unconscious, meaning they're in a coma. They are actually active, dynamic aspects of our being, and they come to play. And the most profound place we see it is in romantic love, because I think the emotion is so intense. Maybe mother-child bond might be close to it, but it's such an intense feeling that it brings up to the surface unconscious content by default.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think of the challenge that nature had in connecting two people that are complete strangers to the point where they're willing to live and die for each other, that's quite a challenge there.
And even be vulnerable, naked, and bonding intimately, and all those, sharing feelings and emotional intimacy, all that with this stranger you never
and then to stay together for lifetimes. You see the kind of the that we're swimming up against the current here. It's not an easy thing. It requires as much understanding as we can muster to make it work. And so hopefully we're contributing to that knowledge that you have about relationships and yourself to give you a better chance at it, because it's an important part of our human experience to be happy in relationships.
And, I think it's so needed right now because the statistics are showing the divorce rate is high. More and more people are bypassing marriage. Young men and women are both not interested in, the traditional get married in your 20s, have kids, and, the typical life. I mean, of course, there's many people still following that, but it just seems that the statistics each year, less and less people are getting married, or they're getting married later in life. And so And it's sad because like working in the love relationship field for so long, I see so many wonderful people so alone. They're so lonely and they don't know how to find that partner. And then people that are in, marriages that are empty and unfulfilling to them, but they stay because they're not satisfied. And it's very rare you find people that are like really happy and they've been together for a long time and they're doing great things, like they're very mutually fulfilled. And so I think that's really the ideal. If we can find that in our lifetime, it's such a wonderful gift.
Absolutely. Great commercial for love.
Yeah, love is coming back in fashion.
So why don't we start with the idealized projection?
Yes, where the nature's beautiful magic trick it does on us.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned kind of this ideal, or let's say the conscious awareness that we have about ourselves, which Jung called the persona, meaning it's the role that we play in life. And certainly in relationships, we need that. We need the persona. There's nothing wrong with it. Except that Jung says if you think that's all there is to you, then you're missing out on the deeper aspects of the psyche, right? In relationships, he says what happens is that when we see the person out there that we're attracted to, what we're doing is projecting an idealized version of that romantic relationship onto that person.
Their hair blows back. There's a glow around them. There's something really magical about them, and you're just drawn to them. And this happens online, whether you're dating online or in a public place, or you meet someone on even a blind date, and there's just something that clicks, right? It's very unconscious. You don't say, "Oh, I'm deciding that I'm going to feel for this person." It feels instinctual.
Yeah, that's why people say we fall in love, because it feels like we tripped and fell into something that we didn't really intend.
You get swept away.
Right. But what is happening there is, the unconscious is being projected onto that person. And it's a powerful experience because this unconscious, or this idealized version of romantic love, now we're seeing it in the flesh, and it's a transcendent experience for many people, right? When we really fall in love, when we're really hooked, we're kind of out of our mind. We experience,
we're not thinking straight.
Yeah, we experience this connection with another human being that is not an everyday occurrence. It's
kind of transcendent. It's like a spiritual experience almost. And you feel this really sense of euphoria in a way. And you think about them, and it's like a drug. It feels very chemical in the body. And so when we talk about that, the question I have is, why do we feel that for some people and not everyone? Like if we're seeing ourselves, like what is that match? And I like your answer, but I always say people fit together like puzzle pieces. And so it's that unconscious, like the right chemistry fitting together.
Yeah. From Jung's perspective, we can say that our unconscious minds fit like that puzzle piece.
Like our shadow, when we talk about the shadow.
Yes. And also the idealized version, which is, we can think of it as the light shadow.
So just for simplicity's sake, when we have like this personality that we accept that is us, and we never think we're so great, like we're not all narcissists. We never think we're so perfect and so great and so wonderful. We're typically, the default for most people is I'm not enough, and and so if we all have that on a conscious level, some level of like disdain for our own self, that what goes in the shadow is the opposite, which is all the the compliments, and you're just doing a great job. That feels natural, not the fake affirmations, but the real, true, like, you're just so wonderful. We suppress that, I guess, because when we're younger, we can't be like that as in public because it's not socially acceptable. Is that why we repress it?
I think that's a part of it, yeah. But when we project the light aspects of our idealized version of love and romantic connection onto the partner or the potential partner, they become so enchanting to us that, like you say, it's almost like a drug. We want to be close to them. And there's actual research that shows our brain chemistry and our biochemistry changes to where we need it. It's like a drug that if we don't have it, like we go into withdrawal. And so we experience depression. We might cry. We might feel completely like we're losing something very precious to us. And so it's a powerful attractor that nature uses, like you said, to connect us, right? To help us bond in that initial period.
What is that term when, is it like where you feel when someone leaves and you feel that you can't live without them, but they're like pets get that, where they're like attachment? I can't really think of it. It's something anxiety, separation anxiety. Yeah. So we have a little bit of that, like you can't wait to see them again and all that. And so it really works beautifully when it's mutual, because then you're both flying down
you're both crazy.
You're both crazy in love, and everyone else is like, what is going on? And you see your friends like, okay, that's interesting. They're so great, but mostly it's really hard to get that mutual. Most of the time it's one person, like the pursuer, and the other person is like, I don't know, I'm kind of not into it. And so there's those dynamics too, where one person sees the idealization that they don't accept, but they're also seeing their shadow around being disconnected or not being able to commit and all that in the person.
Yes, but let's talk about what happens here when this projection, because projection it works this way. Projection is something that we're holding in our own mind, but we're seeing it in the other. It's like a projector, right? It's throwing the image, the picture onto the screen. So the other person is the screen, and we are the ones that have the image within us, right? So we're seeing our own idealized version of love in that person. Now, what happens over time, and this can be over a week or over 10 years, but the projection begins to fade because that person is only a human being.
Their real self. You get to know them.
They're not a divine being. They're essentially human, and they're fallible like everyone else.
They get angry at you for something stupid, or they don't show up at the way you no one really can match that, that idolization, because no one is that perfect.
Yeah.
And so eventually they're going to fall. And so you're saying that infatuation doesn't last. And how do we go to deeper love?
Well, yeah. So here's where a lot of people kind of say, I'm in love, or I love the person, but I'm falling out of love.
Or right? I'm not in love with, I'm not in love anymore.
Yeah, because the projection begins to fade. And often if they still want to continue the relationship, right, then they have to work something out, some kind of arrangement, or go into the next level of love, which is more of a bonding and then a commitment, right?
Yeah, so it's at ABCs, attraction, and then the bonding, and then the commitment. And some people never make it to the bonding stage, right? They get that attraction, and then it's gone really quickly.
Well, in part because if you look at the movies, right, which are kind of the myths of our time, the idea is that you want to be in that romantic attraction phase all your life, and that's not realistic. That's not going to happen.
Like all the romantic movies, the comedies, they end with them rushing off and being in love, but they don't show what happens after that.
Yeah, it's not realistic. It's it's an important phase, but if you don't understand what's happening, then you think, once it starts to wear off, then the relationship is done, right?
Well,
and people move on.
I was in, when I used to work in television, we did an event in Loveland, Colorado on Valentine's Day, and all the couples got married. And then they would get married at the top of the hill and ski down. And we all joked around. We were with the crew and we were saying, "Oh, it's all downhill from here after the marriage."
All those jokes are meant to release some of that anxiety that people feel about, what's going to happen in the long term. And people know that, it's not going to last, but they don't have the kind of knowledge to prepare for that and to make the next phase kind of a smoother transition into bonding and then commitment.
So let's talk about the disillusionment then, because that's really where there's the light part of the shadow that creates that attraction. And the disillusionment comes in when you're not aware of the projections of your unsavory parts of yourself or the things you reject in the partner. So one of the ideas is say you are not aware of your anger, and your partner gets angry, and then all of a sudden it's like, where did that lovely, beautiful man go or woman go? There's this like anger coming up. If we don't recognize or understand that we're seeing our own reflection, or there's a part of us that's also a part, and we just judge that person for being bad or wrong for expressing those traits, that's where the delusionment hits in, right? Disillusionment.
Yeah, because it's kind of a betrayal. In other words, from the point of view of the projector, you feel like this person tricked me. Essentially, they pretended to be someone they're not, and now I'm seeing through them. And
the bait and switch.
The bait and switch, and therefore, often that's where they break up. But the couples that stay together, right, that make it work to the next phase, then they face the challenge of the dark shadow, or let's say the projections continue, but now what's projected or what comes in between the couple is the dark elements of the unconscious mind. Not dark as evil or bad or anything like that, simply what's been repressed in the individual's unconscious mind. Now they see it in the partner. So what you're saying is that in the attraction phase, we see little elements of that, just like kind of like almost like the light. I mean, the dark shadow, but like almost gray, not too bad. And we it's like a test almost. And then as we bond, it's almost like the darker aspects of the shadow come out. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. It's because it's like your ego. Well, here's one of the reasons why we have this is the ego's threatened by us actually losing ourselves to another person. At first, the ego's swept away. The ego's kind of that security, security, safety part of our psyche. And when we're swept away, we're losing control. The ego wants to get control back. So now it's throwing up. We're projecting the shadow. Is that what happens? Yes, because then you get the pressure of finances, of children, of commitment, of, having to work, all these pressures. Aging, gaining weight, and not being that hot person, balding, Yeah, that's when under pressure, then the shadow is projected onto the other person. In other words, it plays out as the blame game, right? Who's to blame for these situations? Well, if this person is in my life, it must be their fault. It's not my fault, right? That's the easy out of projection. It gives us a way to blame, to deflect from ourselves and say, you're the cause of my suffering, of my misery, not me, right? And the partner, of course, is a perfect target because they're right there in your life and you're interacting with them. And they're the closest to you, so they're going to trigger you the most. And so these other aspects start coming out, and that's where the marriage or partnership relationship starts going off the rails. People either withdraw, or they just fight, or they do something, fight or flight, right, or avoid, or just ignore, and just let it just
like stew or not communicate to the person. And we're saying this for people who aren't doing their own inner work. They're just kind of projecting and not realizing. They're blaming and labeling the other person as having those things or being that way without taking responsibility for their projection.
Yeah, and a lot of people read this as these are problematic relationships, but no, this is part of almost every relationship, because this is a natural mechanism for us to grow. It's showing us essentially what's in our own psyche so that we can see it and address it.
Well, and that's a really good point, because most people would be thinking, well, how do I avoid the shadow? Like, how do I avoid this aspect of relationships? What can I do? Like, before I get in a relationship, should I do all my shadow work so then I have this perfect blissful marriage? But actually, I mean, it's also good to do it before too, because you make a better choice. But what you're saying is that we're really, it's a necessary part of our development. And that if we didn't have these triggers from our partner, we would basically stagnate. We wouldn't be evolving in ourselves as people, as humans.
Absolutely.
And then when we understand, if we have the tools to work with the shadow, understand the projections, then we can really start to love that other person, that whole unconditional love. We start to see that, because we stop judging and labeling as good or bad in that other person, and we start to take responsibility for our own participation in the dynamic of the puzzle piece that we're experiencing. And then it's when both partners are growing, that's even more beautiful, because that's where real accelerated growth happens.
Yeah, and the shadow projections, what they do is they allow us to do that inner work, because if we understand what's happening, in other words, if we're self-aware enough to understand, oh, I'm projecting my anger onto my partner, and I'm accusing her of being the angry one, or instigating the fight, or whatever it is. If I recognize that as part of me, that it's coming from me, I'm able to grow myself, right? That's personal development right there. That is the real growth that happens in relationships, that you're able to become larger than your defensive old self, right?
You're evolving together. And then
that's another point though, because it's often we see that people do not grow together.
Yes.
And one partner is interested in personal development and the other one is not. Then we see that one person kind of grows out of the relationship and leaves the other person behind.
Or what I see is sometimes I'll see people that I've worked with and they've evolved, and they start to feel that they're growing faster than their partner, say to me, I could see them resisting continuing the work, because they want to kind of not leave the marriage. They don't want to leave that partnership, and their ego wants that security in the connection, or the physical connection, versus the development of their soul. And I think that when we do mutually go through the shadow, what's after the bonding, that initial attraction, which was basically a facade, actually we start to integrate that beauty in us, and we start to see our own beautiful light in ourselves and not need the partner to always reflect it back. And so we go through the shadow, and our shadow process, it's like bringing more light into our life and more connection to our own light, versus relying on that other person to be the whole light bearer for us. And it's empowering. And the feeling of that aspect of love is much deeper than that flimsy, flaily attraction when you first meet. It feels very powerful because you haven't experienced the good stuff. And so if you could stick with it and go through the shadow work and the rough edges that you rough off from each other, and you see that beautiful diamond underneath, that's really this beautiful, deeper bond that's much more profound than just that physical, biological attraction.
Yes. So ideally, let's say in an ideal situation where both people are interested in personal development and want to work at it, then shadow, or let's say the relationship then really provides an ideal situation for shadow integration, meaning that both individuals are able to acknowledge and learn from their own projections, because the relationship is a mirror of your unconscious mind. And it'll show you precisely what really is in your unconscious mind. The deeper you go into it, the more you put on the table, right? The more you open up, the more vulnerable you become with your partner, the more you start to see the depths of your own soul and the depths of the soul of your partner, which that is really what a great relationship is, right? That you're connected at a much deeper level than the social bonding aspect of marriage.
And I think about, Rob and I just celebrated 19 years of our first date last week. And we were talking about how we're so different. We're like two different people. Those people that met 19 years ago were two different individuals. And those two people, I don't know, they might have lasted, but it's like you're not that persona that when you first meet someone. And if you're doing your inner work, you do get to evolve and you can grow together. And that's what makes love last, is that you're always kind of understanding who you are and retrieving those projections. So you're not making your partner be the container for everything, being the holder of all your self-esteem and your power and your love. You get to be the source yourself. And then that makes a powerful relationship, because who wants to have the burden of carrying someone else's needs, right? We want to help each other, love each other, support each other, but it needs to be mutual, and it can't be one-sided, or it will not last, or it'll just be unhappy. You could physically stay together, but it'll just be this lack of fulfillment. And so what are some ways that people can start to look at their shadow in their relationships?
Yeah. Well, we certainly know that coaching is a powerful way to do it, because often, like we were saying, there's nothing wrong with these patterns. They're part of our human nature. So often in therapy, it gets more complicated, because now they're adding kind of this layer of pathology onto it and saying there's some dysfunction here that we need to address. And, once you open up that can of worms, it's
you're talking about your mother for 10 years. And
it's another thing. Now, some couples may need therapy. That's of course, that's always there for them. But coaching is such a powerful way to approach it, because it's more about personal development, about, examining and knowing yourself from the inside out, and then sharing that knowledge with your partner. Yeah.
And just a little plug for us. We just launched our coaching membership. We've trained hundreds of coaches, and we now have some coaches on our team that are fulfilling some coaching packages, the membership package. So the link is in the show notes if you're interested in getting one-on-one coaching. Very powerful. Also, too, just a quick tip for you to just open your mind a little bit. Again, the one-on-one coaching is going to get you the real work. I know there's a lot of journals out there to journal about your shadow, that you're going to get lots of insights from those things, but it's not the same as coaching, because you're working with the unconscious. So when you're journaling, you're actually just seeing what's on the peripheral of your consciousness and what you know, and your ego will make sense of it, to make it fit. And it sounds, wow, that's so insightful, but nothing changes. And this is where the work the work happens, through emotion and through dealing with the triggers that show up in the relationship. But I do want to say that, think about this just to start. Write down the list of all the things you love about your partner, or there's someone that you are infatuated with or dated before that you can't get out of your mind, or someone you're dating. And then write down all the things that you don't like about them. And then just put them on a list. And then after you write them, without overthinking it, see if you could circle anything that you recognize as yourself in those qualities. And then the things that you don't circle are most likely in your shadow. And so it's a really easy way to just start to conceptualize what this is that we're the things that we don't accept about ourselves or acknowledge about ourselves, the good and the bad, we project onto others, and especially our romantic partner.
Yeah.
And to begin to retrieve the projection is retrieving your own power, taking your power back so that you can have love that lasts.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great exercise, right? But the real work has to be done over a period of time and sessions, because we're dealing with really powerful forces that we need it, of course. We need to have a stable sense of self. So the ego is not going to give up its secrets that easily. You need to work with someone that's skilled and can help you do the inner work, right? Open up the unconscious and really understand what is in our shadow.
And it's individual work. It's not like a couples therapy where you go together with your partner because you want to do your work and they do their work, and then you both come together and compare notes and bond. And that's what we've seen when we've worked with couples. They had different coaches even sometimes that they worked with, and it's just amazing how much closer they can get. And then sometimes you do the work and you realize, I think I'm with the wrong person, or I've been tolerating things for too long, or ignoring things just for that security and safety. And so shadow work really is about reclaiming your power. It's not about dredging up the past and looking at wounds. It's really about looking at all the beauty and light that's in you. Mostly what's in your shadow is all your brilliance and your light that you don't accept. And we settle for relationships that aren't that wonderful relationships because we think that's all there is. And we'd rather be with this person than alone. And sometimes we need to be reminded of who we really are. And that's what shadow work really shows you, is like the beauty, magnificence of who you are.
Yes. And if you're in between relationships, it's a perfect time to do it, because the work is internal. It's about you, right? And you can look at your past history. You can look at your parents' messaging that you received in observing their relationship, and really get a sense of what kind of messages you received in your conditioning early on that you need to work on.
And we came up with this term years ago, and you go from unconscious chemistry, where you're just, it's like banging around like a pinball machine, like who are you going to match up with randomly, to being a conscious chemistry.
Yeah.
And so I just am really excited that to talk about this topic. We haven't talked about it in a while, so it was really fun. Did you enjoy it, Rob?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and 19 years, I can't believe it. So I think we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to check the show notes below for some resources, and subscribe to our podcast so you can hear every episode of Soul Sessions. And we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.